Hi, this is Mark. Welcome back to my channel, What Burns My Ass. This is a channel where I tell you the things that burn my ass, and you tell me whether or not they burn your ass too. So, this video is going to be about a bill I like to see proposed in Congress, that if anybody is testifying in front of Congress, whether it's for a judicial position, whether it's for not for a government agency or just a fellow congressperson, if a question is asked that affects the government's budget, national security, or the American society in general, you're required to answer in the affirmative. You're not allowed to filibuster. You have to answer the question directly in the affirmative or the negative. I think that's going to save the government a lot of time and a lot of problems, and that makes people accountable for the things that they propose and the things they stand behind. And I want to know whether or not this subject burns your ass too.
Nowhere on the app do you actually require the illegal migrants to apply for asylum or to claim asylum or anything about asylum. And in fact, when they then get to the border, you don't ask them questions, you don't do interviews, you just release them. Here's the Texas Monthly, not a notable conservative outlet, who reports, and I quote, "At no point does the app ask users, are you seeking asylum? Those arriving for the CBP-1 appointments are given no interviews, asked no questions about vulnerabilities that they may or may not have listed in the app or about why they're coming to the United States. They're simply released into the country," end quote. So rather than building a wall, Mr. Secretary, you have built Ticketmaster for illegal immigrants.
You are, Senator, you are conflating programs. Let me explain
just
to you.
Respond to this. Is it true that they are given no interviews, asked no questions, and simply released into the country?
Let me explain to you what we announced on January 5th.
No, I want you to explain to me what's happening. I know what you announced. I read it to you.
So I will explain to you what is happening.
Are they given interviews? Let's start with that. Are they given interviews?
We were previously experiencing
That's starting to sound like a no. Well, let's just hone in here. Mr. Secretary, my time is very limited. I don't mean to interrupt you, but I want to drive to some clarity here. The Texas Monthly has reported that once illegal immigrants go on their phone and reserve their time to come to the border, once they use your concierge service that you've created for them, when they come, they are given no interviews. They are asked no questions about any vulnerabilities. They are simply released into the country. Is that happening?
Senator, you are mistaken. And if I may explain.
Are they given interviews?
If I may explain, individuals who seek parole under our January 5th program for Cubans, Haitians, Nicaraguans, and Venezuelans are screened and vetted before they arrive at our border.
Wait a minute. No, they go on the phone and they just reserve a time, and then they show up and they're given nothing. Listen to this. Even immigration advocates are amazed about this. Here, also from the Texas Monthly. Here's one immigration advocate whose first name is Orta. She says, that's the crazy part. Nothing in this new program requires you to actually seek asylum. Somehow, we've decided to punish those who arrive at the border without the app, who may be seeking asylum, but we just let in anybody who may or may not have any particular reason to seek asylum, so long as they've made an appointment on your Ticketmaster app. This seems crazy to me.
Senator, it's a complete mischaracterization of the program that we announced and are implementing.
So how many people have used the app then?
That you are referring to. So if I can explain.
How many people have used the app?
So we had a significant surge of Cubans.
How many people have used the app?
Nicaraguans and Venezuelans.
Mr. Secretary, you're here to answer my questions. How many people have used the app?
Tens of thousands have sought to make an appointment at the port of entry under our parole program.
Okay.
So you can see here, by not answering the questions directly that Senator Hawley posed to Alejandro Mayorkas directly, he was able to avoid taking responsibility for letting hundreds of thousands of unvetted people into our country, which affects our government's budget, which affects our government security and the nation and national security. And this would have outed him as being somebody unfit for the position as the director of Homeland Security. because he was obviously negligent at his position. He was making excuses for allowing hundreds of thousands of people to come across the border, which with them came a lot of fentanyl, which killed hundreds of thousands of Americans across this country as well. And this responsibility lies directly in the hands of Alejandro Mayorkas. And had he been required to answer these questions directly, therefore, he could have been impeached and maybe even imprisoned for being unfit to serve as the Director of Homeland Security.
Good morning, Secretary Mayorkas.
Good morning.
Is there a crisis at our southern border?
Senator, there is a very significant...
That's a yes or no question.
There's a very significant...
Is there a crisis?
Senator, there's a very significant challenge.
I think your microphone is not on.
There is a very significant challenge that we are facing.
Yes or no,
at the southern
is there a
border.
crisis?
I believe I've addressed that question.
So you're
Senator.
refusing to answer?
Senator, there is a very significant challenge, and
Will
we
you
are
answer if there's a
therefore-
crisis?
Therefore, we are dedicating the resources...
Okay, so you're refusing
that
to answer. Well, Secretary Mayorkas, I'll tell you someone who is willing to answer, which is your and President Biden's chief of the Border Patrol in a sworn deposition in July of 2022 when asked, would you agree, Chief Ortiz, that the southern border is currently in crisis? Answer, yes. Notice none of those wiggle words, none of that equivocation. One word, one syllable, yes. Are you willing to speak with the same clarity as Chief Ortiz? Is there a crisis at our southern border, yes or no?
Senator, I'm very proud to work alongside...
So you
and
refuse to
support-
answer. Let me ask you the next question. Has the crisis at our southern border made Americans less safe, yes or no?
Senator, we are dedicated to the safety
Has
and
the crisis
security
made Americans less
of
safe? I don't want a discourse. It's a yes or no question.
Senator, we have a challenge of
You refuse to
immigration,
answer the question.
Not...
Mr. Secretary, let me show you how someone doing his job answers a question in a straightforward manner. Chief Ortiz, is the crisis that is currently ongoing at the southern border making the border less safe for Americans and aliens alike? Answer, yes. One word, one syllable, 3 letters. That's how someone answers a question and does their job. You're being a politician misleading the American people. Let me give you a chance again. Will you show the same integrity Chief Ortiz shows? Is the crisis at the southern border making Americans less safe? Yes or no?
Senator, we have 260,000
You refuse to
people
answer the question. Let's move on.
and security of the
Next
American
question, Mr. Mayorkas. Has the crisis made aliens less safe? Yes or no?
Senator, we are seeking...
So you won't answer that question either.
If you-
It's a yes or no. Has it made aliens less safe?
Senator, smugglers are exploiting...
Has the
vulnerable
crisis
migrants.
made aliens, yes, less safe? Are you willing to answer it?
Senator, the smuggling organizations...
Okay, you're
seek to
filibustering again. Let me ask you this question. How many migrants have died under President Biden?
Senator, your phrasing of the question is actually quite misleading.
How many migrants died in 2022?
Approaching our southern border?
Yes.
Precisely why we are seeking to
So
exclude the smuggling
do you know the answer? Do you know how many died?
I do not.
You do not. Of course you don't. I know how many died. 853.
That is
853. And by the way, here are the numbers that have died every year. You go back to 1998, you see it's consistently between 300 and 400, 300, 400, 300, 400. Suddenly, 2021, what happens? You get in office, and that red line are dead bodies. I've been on the Rio Grande, and I've seen dead bodies floating there who've drowned because of your refusal to do your job. You don't even know how many have died. What do you say to the Texas farmers and ranchers who find pregnant ladies dead on their property, who find toddlers dead on their property? What do you say to them?
I say that is why precisely we are taking it to the smuggling organizations.
But you are not. That is simply not true.
Number 2.
So in this clip, Alejandro Mayorkas continued to decline to answer Senator Cruz's questions. And the reason that he was doing this is because it would have continued to make him look incompetent at his position as the Director of Homeland Security. It also allowed him to justify keeping the Biden administration's open door policy. So he continued to lie. He continued to not answer these questions directly. And by doing so, over the last 4 years, hundreds of thousands of more immigrants were allowed across the border, strewn across the whole country, costing the American taxpayers millions of dollars. And he also allowed thousands and thousands of more of Americans to die from fentanyl poisoning by not doing their jobs, and they should have been held accountable. Their feet should have been held to the fire, and they should have been answer these questions directly. Therefore, I believe a vote on impeachment would have been a lot easier and a lot simpler, and these things could have been ended a lot sooner.
And so you do look at the numbers. You do look at the daily reporting numbers, and want to harken back to an interview in 2019. At that time, with former Secretary of Homeland Security Jay Johnson during the Trump administration, as we were seeing 4,000 immigrants a day coming across the border. At that time, the former Director of Homeland Security, in an interview with MSNBC, said that, and he said, "My staff would tell you that if the number of daily apprehensions was under 1,000 the day before, that was a relative good number. And if it was above 1,000, it was a relative bad number, and I was going to be in a bad mood that day." He also went on to say on Thursday, and again, this was in March of 2019 when Donald Trump was president, there were 4,000 apprehensions. I know that if 1,000 overwhelms the system, I can't begin to imagine what 4,000 a day truly looks like. We are in a crisis. And so my question to you, if Secretary Johnson said 1,000 immigrants a day when he was in the position that you sent, if that was a bad day, and that 4,000 a day was a crisis, what is a bad day for you, Secretary Mayorkas? Because we see now that the numbers have exploded. They're no longer 1,000 a day. They're not even 4,000 a day when this article was written. They're over 11,000 a day. And so in the last 20 seconds, what number to you represents a bad day when we see the number of apprehensions increase dramatically? So I'll give you the remainder of my time to answer the question, and I'll yield back.
Vice Chairman Guest, we do not minimize the significance of the challenge at the southwest border, and we are intensely focused on it.
Is there a number? Would you like to give a number? I asked for a number. That was my question. What number to you represents a bad day? And are you refusing to answer the question?
Vice Chairman Guest, as I said, we do not minimize the significance of the challenge at the southwest border.
That wasn't my question, Mr. Mayorkas. I asked a simple question. Give me a number. And you're filibustering, and you're refusing to answer the question. What is that number?
I have answered your question.
No, you haven't, Mr. Mayorkas. You've not answered the question.
I can do
In this clip, Alejandro Mayorkas refused to answer Representative Michael Guest's inquiries about the border. Like, what's the number that, connotates a crisis to him? And Alejandro Mayorkas demonstrated a complete lack of intent to address the influx of migrants coming across the border. And he inclined to do so because he wanted to uphold the open border policies of the Joe Biden administration. And this was irrelevant of national security or the welfare of American people. All he cared about was that he was allowing these people to come across the border and keeping somebody, whether it was directly Joe Biden or whoever actually was running the government at that time, he was fulfilling their requests to keep the border open and allow as many people across the border as they can. I'm very secure with that. Now, had he been required to answer this question too, I think it would have made him responsible for the crisis at the border.
Question, please, because you've testified under oath that you only posted about your dog and sports teams and novels, and you also said you wouldn't give this committee any of your public posts. So, is your post on February 18th, 2022, bemoaning the lifting of mask requirements for children under the age of 5, who I might just ask, all of the data has said is extremely harmful to children, these mask requirements? We'll leave that aside for now. Is that a post about your dog or sports teams? Yes or no?
My social media is in my personal capacity, Senator.
Yes or no, Ms. Shogan? You are under oath before this committee, and I have to say, you have placed this issue squarely in record by repeatedly refusing to answer. Yes or no?
My social media is in my personal capacity, Senator.
So you're not answering my question. Let's talk about another post. 26th of May, 2022, you talk about an assault weapons ban. Retweet a post, ban assault weapons now. Say you agree with this idea that you have to be a certain age to buy so-called assault weapons in America. Is that a post about sports teams or your dog or mystery novels?
My social media is in my personal capacity, Senator.
What about the post on January 5th of 2021 in which you say that Ted Cruz ought to stay in his own lane and not worry about what's going on in Pittsburgh? This is a reference, I think, to questions he had about the certification of the last election. Is that a post about your dog or sports teams or mystery novels?
My social media is in my personal capacity, Senator.
What about the post, you remember December 10th, 2020, where you said that you were hoping that President Trump would have his vetoes overridden, and you agreed with the post that he was a weak policy president? Is that a post about your dog or sports teams or mystery novels?
My social media is in my personal capacity.
What about your post on January 5th, 2021, in which you speculated that President Trump would pardon himself next, participating in a conversation about the certification of the Electoral College? Is that a post about sports teams or mystery novels or your work at the White House Historical Association?
My social media is in my personal capacity, Senator.
What about the post? Do you remember this one? I said we seem to be having an incredible case of amnesia, but maybe you remember this one. This is from December 3rd of 2021, in which you advise an individual who goes by Meg on social media that the Library of Congress, you advise this person to complain about religious flags that have been planted on the grounds of the Library of Congress, and you say that they ought to be removed. And you go on to give this person advice about how to complain and have them removed. Do you remember that post?
My social media is in my personal
Do you remember the post?
capacity. My
Do you
social
remember
media is
the
in my
post?
personal capacity, Senator.
I have to say, I have been here for 4 years in the Senate. I have never seen a witness stonewall like this before. Never. I've seen a lot. This is extraordinary. Do you remember this post? December 3rd, 2021.
My social media is in my personal capacity, Senator.
I mean, this is unbelievable. And you want to be the archivist of the United States. You lied to us under oath. You lied to us in your QFRs. You just lied to me a second ago under oath. And now you're sitting here stonewalling, not answering questions about public posts that you've made. Are you a lawyer, Ms. Shogan?
No, Senator.
Are you familiar with the Shurtleff case at the United States Supreme Court?
No, Senator, I'm not.
Well, in that case, the Supreme Court held that, in fact, it constitutes viewpoint discrimination for a government entity to remove religious flags from its property when it's opened up the property to allow other people to put flags on it. Exactly the question that you were addressing in your public posts on Twitter. You're giving legal advice, which you're not qualified to give, directly contrary to the United States Supreme Court. I just wonder, does this have to do with your view that you wrote about that the religious right is connected to the rise of anti-intellectualism in American politics? Is that why you said what you said about religious flags, that the religious right is a force for anti-intellectualism? Explain that to me.
No, Senator.
Do you stand by your comment that the religious right is part of the rise of anti-intellectualism in American politics?
Senator, that article was written. It was about how Republican presidents use common sense terminology to effectively communicate with Americans.
Yeah, in which you said that the religious right, the rise of the religious right is part of the rise of anti-intellectualism in American politics. I just point out that's the article in which you say anti-intellectual, the title is Anti-Intellectualism in the Modern Presidency, Republican Populism. Very nonpartisan. Dr. Shogan, I'm going to ask you again, will you give to this committee your public posts on Twitter? Will you make them available to this
My social
committee?
media is in my personal capacity.
Mr. Chairman, I have to tell you, this is the most extraordinary thing I have seen in my brief time in the Senate. I have never seen a witness blatantly lie under oath like Dr. Shogan has just done to this committee, stonewalled this committee, and just repeatedly refused to answer my questions about her own posts that are in public. For these reasons, I will oppose your nomination, and I strongly, strongly urge this committee to take action on this and force this witness to own up to the fact that she is misleading us right now before our eyes, Mr. Chairman.
In this clip, Senator Hawley went back after another nominee, a woman named Colleen Shogan. She was being nominated to be the archivist of the United States. And he questioned her about several of her multimedia or social media posts across several different platforms. And a lot of them was very negative against the American people and the American government in general. And when he called her out on it, she refused to answer any of those things. She stonewalled. And I think anybody up for a position, a federal position, that, they're getting paid well. And there are things that are, like she's supposed to take care of the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence. She's in charge of some of our country's most important documents. And yet the way she acted in this interview to be nominated, she should not have gotten that position. But somehow she made it in because that's the way our bipartisan government works. But she should have been required to answer to each one of these social media posts that painted her in a light that, had she been required to answer those questions, she probably wouldn't have gotten the position.
What's victory look like in this, or what does improvement look like?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And I would suggest to you that we have seen progress already. When we have 12 of the biggest corporations of America who have, I convene them in my office and they have agreed to help us work on this issue. Success so far is the bringing together of community-based organizations, not only in the United States, but here in Guatemala. Today, that was one of my meetings with civil society leaders, to let them know we see them and we understand their concerns about corruption, and we also understand their role of leadership to help us in terms of how we prioritize our work in this region.
So how quickly does this change what we see at the border?
I don't know that we're going to see it. Listen, I've been very clear from the beginning. There's not going to be a quick fix. So we've seen progress, but the real work is going to take time to manifest itself. Will it be worth it? Yes. Will it take some time? Yes.
There's one other topic I wanted to talk to you about, but let me just quickly put a button.
Okay.
Do you have any plans to visit the border?
I'm here in Guatemala today. At some point, we are going to the border. We've been to the border. So this whole thing about the border, we've been to the border. We've been to the border.
You haven't been to the border.
And I haven't been to Europe. And I don't understand the point that you're making. I'm not discounting the importance of the border.
Well, I mention it because I know Republicans have certainly come at you on this, but Democratic Congressman Cuellar has a border district, has said to you and the president, come. You need to see this.
Listen, I care about what's happening at the border.
In this final clip, Lester Holt is speaking with Kamala Harris, a nominee for the Democrat nominee to run for president of the United States. And she was asked several questions about the border crisis. She was asked about going to the border. And she tried to lie, but Lester Holt actually held her feet to the fire, which is surprising because NBC was usually a shill for the Democrat Party. But he asked a pertinent question. And it was surprising that he did that. But she still refused to answer it. And I think this will go down in history as one of the most bizarre answers to a question from anybody that was running for the president of the United States. Because she had never been to the border. She said she kept saying they've been to the border. She knew that she had not. She wasn't being sincere. Fortunately, though, this was just a news broadcast. So, I mean, she wasn't going to be required to answer these. But had this same testimony gone in Congress, she should have been required to answer whether or not she's been there. I think she should have answered why they're not doing anything about the border crisis. Why are they maintaining the open border policies of the Biden administration? She should have been required to answer all those questions to Congress. And unfortunately, that's something that's not required. But I think that's something that our country should propose to Congress. And I think these are things that would increase our country's security. It would decrease the amount of time to pass certain things, nominating people in Congress, and all kinds of other budget issues and bill issues could be answered so much faster if people were made to answer questions directly and be responsible for their responses. That's what should happen in this country. Because when they're not, that's something that burns my ass. And I think it should burn your ass too. So this is the end of another great video. I hope you like and subscribe. And I always want you to remember, what burns my ass probably burns your ass too. Thanks for watching.